Captain Lee Jiho stood in heavy chains before the massive vault. His military uniform was torn and covered with dust from 3 weeks of being a prisoner. The vault in front of him was enormous, rising 30 meters into the sky. Its surface was completely smooth and black like glass, but reflected nothing. This ancient structure had been standing on the planet Kellion 7 for millions of years, long before any known civilization existed. Commander Thexval of the Zeltheri walked slowly around the vault. He was frustrated and angry. His 4 arms moved in sharp gestures as he watched his technicians work. Behind him, a dozen alien scientists huddled over their advanced machines. But nothing worked. For 3 whole months, the smartest minds in the Zeltheri Empire had tried to open this vault. They had failed completely. They could not even make a scratch on its surface. "Bring the human closer," Thexval ordered. His voice came through a translator device that turned his clicking sounds into words. 2 guards pushed Jiho forward roughly. He stumbled but managed to stay on his feet. He looked up at the massive vault, studying it carefully with his eyes. Around him, the Zeltheri officers made clicking and chittering sounds. Jiho had learned this meant they were laughing at him. "Does this primitive creature really think can help us?" asked Subcommander Raxkill. His body was covered in a hard shell that looked like crystal. It shined brightly under the 2 suns of Kellion 7. Humans barely learn how to travel between stars. They are like children playing with toys. Thexval's mouth part spread wide. This was how his species smiled. "Yes, humans are inferior, but my science team suggested we try this experiment. Maybe fresh eyes, even stupid ones, might see something we missed." He turned to look at Jiho. "You told us you were an archaeologist before your people made you a soldier. Is this true?" "Yes, Commander," Jiho answered calmly. He kept his voice steady and emotionless. "I studied ancient ruins on Earth and Mars. I specialize in very old civilizations from before machines existed." The clicking sounds from the Zeltheri officers grew louder. Many of them made noises that showed they thought this was ridiculous. Pre-industrial civilizations. Raxkill shouted with contempt. "This vault is millions of years old. It existed before space travel was invented. What could a human possibly know that we do not?" "Silence," Thexval commanded. He pointed 2 of his 4 arms at the vault. "Human, you have 1 hour. If you succeed in opening this vault, you and the other human prisoners will get better food and treatment. If you fail..." His translator device paused for effect. "Well, we have limited resources on this planet. Prisoners are expensive to keep alive." Jiho understood the threat perfectly. Behind him, in the prison camp, 73 other humans were waiting. They were all survivors from a supply ship called Jeju Star that had been shot down during the battle for this planet. Among those prisoners was his younger sister, Hannah. She was a medical officer who had only been in the military for a few months before the war started. Jiho walked slowly toward the vault. He ignored all the complicated instruments and scanning machines scattered around the base of the structure. The Zeltheri scientists had used only technology to try to open it. They had used quantum probes, sound wave generators, and machines that could break apart molecules. They had tried every advanced tool that their powerful empire possessed. Nothing had worked. Jiho kneeled down on the ground. He reached out and placed his bare hand directly on the vault's surface. It was warm. The Zeltheri officers suddenly became very quiet. They were all watching carefully now. None of them had thought to simply touch the vault with their bare skin. Their species always used instruments and machines to interact with the world. Their hard outer shells prevented them from touching most things directly. Jiho closed his eyes. He pressed his palm flat against the warm surface. The warmth seemed to pulse, like a heartbeat. He moved his hand slowly across the surface, feeling carefully. He was searching for any changes in temperature, any difference in texture, anything that suggested this was more than just a locked container. "What is the human doing?" Raxkill whispered. He sounded confused and uncertain. "Wasting our time, obviously," another officer replied with a dismissive click. But Commander Thexval said nothing. He simply watched and waited. Something about the human's actions interested him, though he did not understand why. Jiho stood up and began walking around the entire perimeter of the vault. His hand never left the surface. He stopped twice, then continued walking. On his third complete circle around the structure, he paused at one section. This section looked exactly the same as all the other sections to anyone looking at it, but it felt different. The warmth in the spot pulsed in a pattern. Slow, then faster, then slow again. It reminded Jiho of breathing. It was as if the vault was somehow alive. Jiho worked carefully and slowly, paying no attention to the small flying cameras that buzz around him. He had used a chalk to mark 37 different spots on the vault's surface. At each of these spots, the temperature was slightly different. The differences were very tiny, just fractions of a degree. The Zelthari machines were too advanced to notice such small changes, but Jiho's human hands could feel them easily. He sat down on the ground and looked at all the marks he had made. They formed a pattern. It was not random. The marks looked like a constellation of stars, similar to the ancient star charts he had studied back on Earth, but much older, far more ancient than anything humans had ever created. His mind wandered to memories of his grandfather, Park Daeho. The old man had taught him how to solve puzzles when he was just a child. Jihoya, his grandfather, would always say, "The ancient people did not think like we do today. They felt the world with their hearts and hands. Use your fingers and your feelings, not just your eyes and your brain." Jiho smiled sadly at the memory. His grandfather had died 2 years before the war with the Zelthari began. The old man never knew that his grandson would end up on an alien planet, using those childhood lessons to try to save lives. Jiho stood up again. He traced invisible lines between the marked points with his fingers, connecting them like a dot-to-dot puzzle. The warmth increased wherever the lines crossed each other. The vault was responding to him, but it was not responding to technology or machines. It was responding to organic touch, to the heat from his body, to the small electrical signals that naturally exist in human skin. Behind the surveillance equipment in the command center, Thexval leaned closer to his monitor screen. "What is a human doing now?" he asked his chief scientist. The technician, whose name was Veksha, adjusted her instruments carefully. "Commander, the vault surface temperature is increasing by 0.3 degrees at each point where the human touches it. Our equipment cannot create the same effect. We have tried many times." "Why not?" Thexval demanded. "Why can a human do something our advanced technology cannot?" "We do not know for certain, Commander," Veksha replied hesitantly. "Our hard shells may be blocking the signal. Or—" She paused, uncomfortable with what she was about to say. "The vault may be designed to respond only to soft-skinned mammalian creatures like humans." Thexval's mouth parts clicked slowly. This was a sign that he was thinking very deeply about something. "Are you suggesting that millions of years ago, whoever built this vault deliberately designed it to exclude species like ours?" "The evidence suggests this, Commander," Veksha said quietly. Meanwhile, in the prison camp several kilometers away, Jiho's sister Hannah pressed her face against the metal fence. She stared at the distant vault, barely visible on the horizon. "Please work, Appa," she whispered to herself. "You can do this. I know you can." Standing beside her was a young soldier named Private Choi Miho. He was barely 20 years old. "Just a boy, really. Do you really think your brother will actually open it?" he asked nervously. "If anyone can do it, Jiho can," Hannah replied with confidence in her voice. He spent 10 years of his life studying things that nobody else cared about anymore. Ancient human ruins, old puzzles, forgotten languages that nobody spoke. Everyone in our family thought he was wasting his time and his education. She smiled proudly. But it turns out the universe needed someone who still remembers how to think like the ancient people did. Back at the vault, Jiho had discovered something new and important. Between certain marked points, very faint lines had begun to glow. The glow was so dim and weak that only his eyes could see it after they had adjusted to the darkness in the shadow of the vault. The Zelthari had completely missed these lines. Their eyes worked differently than human eyes. They could see colors and light that humans could not see, but they were blind to the subtle glow that Jiho now observed. The glowing lines formed symbols. They were not written words in any language. Instead, they were simple pictures, what scholars call pictographs. These were universal concepts that any intelligent species might understand, no matter where they came from. The symbols represented life, death, growth, decay, balance. These were ideas that all living beings could recognize. And at the very center, where all the glowing lines came together and met, a single symbol pulsed with light. This symbol meant choice. Gio's breath caught in his throat. Suddenly, he understood everything. The vault was not a puzzle to be solved with cleverness. It was not a lock to be picked with tools. It was a test of character and understanding. Only 15 minutes remained of his 1 hour. Gio placed both of his hands on the center symbol. His heart was beating very fast and hard in his chest. The moment his skin touched the symbol, everything changed. The warmth from the vault spread through his palms, traveled up his arms, and then somehow, impossibly, it went straight into his mind. Images flooded into his head like a rushing river. They were not words or language. They were feelings. They were memories that did not belong to him. He saw the builders of the vault. They were strange beings, not like humans and not like the Zelthari either. They were something completely different, something in between. These ancient creatures had been very wise and incredibly old, but they were dying. Their entire civilization had reached its highest point and then begun to fall apart. But they did not fall because of war. They did not die from disease. They destroyed themselves through their own evolution. They had made themselves perfect. They had removed all their weaknesses and inefficiencies. But in doing this, they had lost something very important. They had lost empathy. They had lost the ability to connect with others. They could no longer understand suffering unless it was their own suffering. The vault was their final gift to the universe. It was also their warning. Gio gasped and pulled his hands away from the symbol. He stumbled backward, almost falling. The surveillance drone swooped down closer to him, their cameras recording everything. What happened? Thexval's voice came through the speakers, sharp and demanding. What did you see, human? Gio steadied himself, breathing hard like he had just run a long race. I understand now, he said, still trying to catch his breath. The vault is not locked with technology or codes. It is locked with intention. It reads whoever touches it. It reads their purpose, their emotions, their capacity for compassion and caring. That is complete nonsense. Rackskill's voice crackled through the speakers angrily. Emotions have nothing to do with security systems. This is impossible. Not to the builders, Gio replied firmly. He turned to face the nearest camera drone. Your species evolved in a different way. Commander, you chose efficiency, logic, and conquest. Those things are not wrong or evil, but... He paused, searching for the right words. The vault does not recognize those things as worthy. The builders did not consider those to be good purposes. Thexval's clicking sounds came through the speaker. They were rapid and irregular, showing he was agitated. And humans are worthy? Is that what you are claiming? I do not know if we are worthy, Gio admitted honestly, but we still remember how to feel empathy for others, even for our enemies, even for people we have never met. He approached the vault again, but this time he understood what he needed to do. The test was not about solving a clever puzzle with his brain. It was not about being smart or skilled. It was about proving that after millions of years, someone still existed in the universe who could understand what the builders had lost. Someone who could learn from their terrible mistake. Gio placed his hands on the center symbol again. But this time, he did not think about opening the vault. He did not think about saving his sister Hannah. He did not think about winning the war or escaping from prison. Instead, he thought about the builders themselves. He thought about how lonely they must have been at the very end of their existence. How desperate and sad they must have felt, knowing their great civilization would vanish completely from the universe. They had hoped that somehow, someday, someone would find their vault and read their message. Someone would learn from their mistakes and not repeat them. Gio felt genuine sadness and sorrow for beings who had been dead for millions of years. He mourned for them like he would mourn for his own family. The vault responded immediately. Deep inside the ancient structure, mechanisms that had been sleeping for eons suddenly came to life. The seamless black surface began to separate along invisible lines that no one had been able to see before. Dust fell away like snow from the cracks. Light emerged from inside, warm and golden. It was nothing like the harsh, cold illumination of Zelthari technology. This light felt alive and welcoming. The vault began to open. Its sections spiraled outward like the petals of a flower blooming after millions of years of sleep. Thexval and all his officers stood in complete silence, their instruments forgotten, their mouths open in shock. The primitive human had accomplished in 1 hour what their advanced civilization could not achieve in 3 months of constant effort. Jiho, exhausted and drained, turned to face the cameras. His voice was quiet but steady. The builders did not want conquerors to find this place. Commander, they wanted someone who still remembered how to care about others, someone who still had a heart. Thexval and his officers rushed into the vault chamber. Their instruments were scanning everything frantically, searching for valuable technology. But what they found inside was not what they expected at all. There were no weapons, no warships, no advanced technology that could help them win the war. Instead, they found a library. Thousands of crystalline data cores lined the walls from floor to ceiling. Each one contained information, glowing softly with internal light. There were millions of these cores, each one holding the complete history of a civilization that had died long ago. The builders had collected knowledge from dozens of extinct species. They had preserved their cultures, their art, their science, their philosophies, and most importantly, their mistakes. This is completely worthless. Raxkill hissed angrily. His disappointment was obvious in every word. We wasted 3 months for a museum, for old books and dead history. But Geo was not listening to the angry officer. He was reading the central display that had appeared in the middle of the chamber. Symbols floated in the air like holograms. His wrist device was translating the pictographs slowly. With each new symbol that appeared, Geo's face became more serious and worried. "Commander Thexval," he said quietly, "you need to see this. You need to read this message." The alien commander walked over to stand beside Jiho. His multiple eyes focused on the floating display. His translator device began to interpret the ancient message slowly, word by word. "To those who open this vault, you have proven you possess what we lost. You still have the ability to understand suffering beyond your own. This library contains a collected wisdom of 17 different civilizations that destroyed themselves. Each one achieved great technological mastery. Each one became very powerful and advanced. But each one forgot something important. They forgot that progress without compassion leads only to extinction. Learn from our failures. Please do not repeat our mistakes." More symbols appeared in the air. Geo's face went very pale as he read them. "What is it?" Thexval demanded. "What else does it say?" "There's a weapon here after all," Geo said slowly. "A defensive system capable of protecting this vault and whoever controls it from any attack in the universe. It could end the war between our species immediately." Raxkill's mouthpart spread wide in triumph and joy. "Excellent news. We can use it to..." "It only responds to those who pass the empathy test." Geo interrupted him firmly, just like the vault itself. "In your hands, Commander, it would be nothing but useless metal. It would not work for you or any of your people." The entire chamber fell into complete silence. The only sound was the soft humming of the ancient systems that were powering up after sleeping for millions of years. Thexval studied Geo very carefully with all of his eyes. "So you could use this weapon. You could defend your human species. You could perhaps even attack my people with it." His translator paused. "Why are you telling me this truth? Why not just take the weapon secretly?" Jiho met the alien commander's complex gaze directly. "Because I read the rest of the message. Every civilization preserved in this library had access to the same weapon. Every single one used it to defeat their enemies." He gestured with his hand at all the data cores surrounding them, and every single one of them is now extinct, gone forever. Not because the weapon failed to protect them, but because possessing ultimate power made them stop trying to understand their enemies. They stopped seeking peace because they no longer needed to. They became arrogant and careless. He stepped closer to Thexval, his chains rattling. "The builders are warning us. Commander, they are warning both of our species. Your people have forgotten compassion in your pursuit of conquest and efficiency. My people," he swallowed hard, "we are walking down the same dangerous path. We are using your invasion to justify our own cruelty and ruthlessness. We are becoming just like you. What exactly are you proposing, human?" Thexval asked. His tone was unreadable, giving nothing away. "I propose we share this library with both our peoples," Jiho said clearly. "All 17 civilizations worth of knowledge, freely accessible to everyone. The Zelthari can learn what your species lost during your evolution toward pure logic. Humans can learn what we are in danger of losing as we become more militarized and hard." "That is completely absurd," Raxkill interjected angrily. "We are at war. You expect us to share our greatest discovery with the enemy." "Exactly," Gio replied, his voice steady. "That is precisely why we need this knowledge more than we need another weapon. Because we are at war, we have forgotten how to be anything else." 3 months passed. The war between humans and the Zelthari had not ended, but something important had changed. The Vault's library had been opened to scholars and scientists from both species. It happened reluctantly. There were heavy guards everywhere. There were countless rules and restrictions about what could be studied and shared. But despite all the difficulties and mistrust, the library was open. Both sides had access it. Commander Thexval had faced severe criticism from his superiors back on the Zelthari homeworld. Many called him a traitor. Some demanded his execution for helping the enemy. But the discovery was too significant and important to hide or suppress. The ancient knowledge contained in the library included technologies that neither species had achieved yet. It contained philosophy and wisdom that both had forgotten. Most importantly, it contained warnings that neither could afford to ignore. Geo stood on the observation deck of the human military ship called Inchan Dawn. He watched the planet Kellyan, 7 slowly rotating below him in space. He had been promoted to a higher rank. He had received medals and awards. Every major news network in human space had interviewed him. He was called a hero. He hated all of it. Appa, his sister Hannah, approached him carrying 2 cups of hot tea. "You look miserable for someone who just saved 73 lives and possibly prevented a war from getting worse." Jiho accepted the tea gratefully, wrapping his cold hands around the warm cup. "The war has not ended, Hannah. It has just paused. Both sides are too curious about the library to keep fighting at full strength right now. But curiosity will not last forever. That is still real progress," Hannah insisted, sitting down beside her brother. "Things are better than they were." "Are they really?" Jiho stared at his own reflection in the viewport window. "I gave both sides access to knowledge that could make them more dangerous than before. What if I just delayed the inevitable destruction? What if I made things worse in the long run?" "Then you delayed it," a new voice said firmly. Captain Kim Sojun, the commander of the ship, walked over to join them. "Every single day this war does not escalate is a day when more people stay alive on both sides. That matters greatly, Lieutenant Lee. Never forget that." Gio nodded slowly, wanting to believe his captain's words. "I keep thinking about the builders," he said quietly. "They had thousands of years to perfect their civilization. They had all the time in the universe to get things right, and they still failed in the end. They still destroyed themselves. But they left the vault behind," Hannah pointed out gently. "Even at the very end, when they knew they were doomed, they still tried to help whoever would come after them. That is not failure, Appa. That is hope. That is the best kind of courage." Down on the surface of Kellyan 7, in a prefabricated research station near the vault, Thexval stood alone before a holographic display. It was showing him one of the extinct civilization's final messages. His translator device converted the ancient pictographs into words he could understand. "We achieved everything we sought in life. We created perfect logic, perfect efficiency, perfect control over our world. We eliminated all the weaknesses that made us vulnerable to danger and pain. Only too late did we realize the terrible truth. Those weaknesses were what made us truly alive. Those imperfections were what made us care about each other. Preserve your weaknesses. Protect your imperfections. They are your greatest strength, not your flaw. Veksha entered the chamber quietly. Commander, the High Council is demanding another report about the Vault's military applications. They want to know what weapons we can extract from it. Thexval deactivated the display with a wave of his hand. Tell them the Vault's primary application is preventing the need for military force entirely. Tell them the greatest weapon is understanding, not destruction. They will not like that answer, but it is the truth that the human helped me finally see. The human, Lieutenant Li Geo, has requested permission to return to the Vault. Veksha continued. He wishes to continue studying the library. Should I deny his request as the security protocol suggests? Thexval's mouth parts moved in a pattern that Veksha had never seen from him before. It seemed to show uncertainty mixed with something that might have been respect or admiration. Grant his request, he said finally, and assign him one of our best Zelthari research partners to work with him. Lieutenant Li Geo understands something important that we forgot long ago. Knowledge that is shared becomes stronger. Knowledge that is hoarded and hidden eventually dies. Veksha hesitated before leaving. Commander, some of the other officers are saying that you've been compromised by human thinking. They say you are no longer loyal to our kind. Perhaps they are correct, Thexval replied calmly. Perhaps I've been compromised, but I have also been reading the library's warnings every day. Every single civilization that refused to learn from other species eventually faced the same fate, extinction. He turned to face his subordinate directly. I would rather be compromised and alive than pure and extinct. On board the Incheon Dawn, Jiho received a notification on his datapad. His request had been approved. He would return to Kellyan. 7. To continue studying the Vault. This time he would go as a researcher and scholar, not as a prisoner of war. Are you absolutely sure about this decision? Hannah asked with worry clear in her voice. You will be surrounded by Zelthari again. You will be in danger. I am sure, Jiho replied with confidence. Grandfather used to tell me that the best way to solve an impossible puzzle is to work together with someone who sees the problem differently than you do. He smiled at the memory. It turns out that wisdom applies to much more than just puzzles. As the Incheon Dawn prepared to transport him back down to the planet's surface, Jiho looked one more time at Kellyan, 7 through the viewport. The Vault stood there on the surface, its ancient mechanisms now fully awakened after millions of years. Its library was open to species that desperately needed the wisdom it contained. The builders had died countless ages ago. Their civilization was lost to time, forgotten by the universe. But in their final act before extinction, they had left behind something more powerful than any weapon could ever be. They left a reminder that survival required more than just intelligence and technology. It required the wisdom to understand others, even when they were different and frightening. Whether humanity and the Zelthari would truly learn that lesson remained uncertain. The future was unclear. But for the first time since the war began, there existed a chance. A small, fragile, precious chance that both species might choose a better path. And sometimes, Geo thought as he prepared for transport back to the Vault, sometimes a chance is enough to build hope upon. The end.